Dave Warner, my address,
Occupation.
occupation, I'm retired.
What was your part in the bridge disaster?
Well, when the bridge went down, I happened to have been an Ohio State Trooper at the time and was stationed at the Jackson Post. And when it went down, as a result of that, of course, all of your patrolmen in the area ended up being involved in that in one way or another as first responders. And I ended up being assigned on mostly traffic control because that did affect the whole flow through the whole area, and some minimal recovery responsibilities.
Did you know anybody that went down?
No, I didn't know anyone at all that went down on the bridge. Matter of fact, I wouldn't be able to give you a name at all now of anyone that went down. I know there were people in the area. I know some people in the Meigs County area who talk of relatives that went down with the bridge. But I don't know anybody personally. I just heard stories of over the years.
Do you have any stories about when it went down?
Well, there's several things that went on. One of the things that I always wondered about. Some time back, I went happened to be in Point Pleasant on other business, and I went by that monument they have there. I wondered a little bit about why the Mothman had anything to do with it, but so be it. And but in noticing the number of people that went down, I think it says 48 people was on the monument over there, but I remember taking statements off of people who said they just got off the bridge or were just getting on the bridge, and I'm quite sure that probably half of the statements I took, that was not the case, but they wanted it to be. But one of the things I noticed in statements that I took were that several people mentioned mentioned a hitchhiker on the bridge. We call them on the patrol, we call them Knights of the Highway, but there are these people, they call them homeless nowadays. We call them Knights of the Highway. They're on their way east or west, depending on the season, and all of their belongings under their arm in a paper sack. Well, quite a few of the statements I took, I probably took some 15, 20, 25 statements. I don't remember how many. Well, I would say half of them made some comment about that hitchhiker. And he was never mentioned anywhere else, and I've never heard him mentioned since. And if he went down with the bridge, of course, that would mean that there were 49 fatalities instead of 48, but he's not, and never will be, and nobody knows. That I always wondered about that. But those things, the investigations on those things get concluded, and that's the end of them. And it's a part of history that's just out there.
What point in time did you arrive on scene and what was going on?
I came in when the bridge actually went down at 5, roughly in that period of time. I was just coming through Chillicothe on the way back from Christmas shopping, had my family in the car. I was off duty. And I got stopped in Chillicothe on 35 asking me, where are you going? And knew the trooper. And he told me then that the Silver Bridge had sunk, and you can't cross the bridge. Well, I had no intention to cross the bridge anyway. I lived in Jackson. So on the way home then from there, I passed, of course, the patrol post on 35 going in and stopped to find out what was wrong. And they said, you're on duty now, so drop your family off and come back, which I did. And I ended up out here on what's out there about where Holzer is now on 35, and sort of a last effort at 160 to make sure that everybody understood they can't get past Gallup-Place. And of course the road didn't take you straight to the river then, but and I ended up there until dark. It was dark. And I got replaced sometime in the morning, and then the next day I was assigned back down again. And what a lot of us had to do at that point, we were assigned. Of course, we were classified in those days anyway. You're 24 hours. You're always on call. And for the next weeks, it was in and out, in and out, in and out, down there and back, and down there and back for either having rounding up witnesses, looking for witnesses, contacting people at their house, getting statements, that type of thing. That we had a recovery operation. The patrol at that time had a fairly new divers unit, underwater recovery. But the patrol wasn't that much involved at the bridge itself, because that was a West Virginia bridge. And but they were called in, hard hats out of New Orleans, I understood, were called in to help with a lot of the recovery. I was at Roller Dam, where the patrol went down there to see what kind of recovery operations were there. And one of the things I remember there was Bruce Scholl, who was a diver, patrol diver I think he was stationed at Chillicothe at the time. He was from Pomeroy. His mother ran the Court Street Grill up there at the time. He grew up over top of the grill. But anyway, he might have been stationed at Portsmouth. But anyway, he was an underwater recovery diver for the patrol. And I line tended for him because I had worked with him before. And he went down for recovery down at the Roller Dam, and I intended the line. And of course, the signal was that if you get a couple tugs, he wants you to bring him out or help him out. And of course, I'm waiting on a tug, and I felt a couple tugs, and drastic tugs. And so I started pulling in the line just as fast as I could pull in the line, and I couldn't take the slack out of the line. I thought he'd come unhooked, and that scared me. But he come up out of the water like a dolphin. And I said, "Good Lord, Bruce, what's the matter?" He said, "I'm going back down there." And I said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, there's catfish down there bigger than me." And he, of course, the mucky water you had to feel. And I can imagine feeling coming across with the catfish, his head's foot and a half wide, but those kind of things that happen with the patrol, they weren't funny at the time, but they are now, and as time goes by. But I can remember seeing when I first got down here that evening, there was I think it was Cecil Carpenter was telling me about the guy going down a river on top of the van Hannah's outfit, and the reefer trailer didn't sink because it was a load of mattresses. And the driver was on top of that. I understand his co-driver died, drowned in the cab. He was hooked in a sleeper. So those things were going on all the time, and so many stories came out that which are actually true and which aren't. In a case like that, if it makes sense, it's probably true. If you think about it a little bit and it doesn't make sense anymore, then it's probably not true.
So you said you were rounding up witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of stories were you getting? Were you trying to find out why the bridge or how?
What did they see so that information could be placed with an overall story of what was seen, so that the engineers and or whoever could put together some kind of explanation as to what happened. There was quite a time before they really found out. I understood they took the divers, they brought the bridge out and put it back together up at the National Guard Armory up north of Point Pleasant. Laid it out in the field up there someplace, and put it back together in an attempt to find out what broke first, what let loose. And of course, from what I remember then, it had something to do with the pilings in the river are not on bedrock, and they have a float to them, and the bridge itself had to have some way to compensate for that. So it was on rockers of some sort, and one of those rockers deteriorated because, well, we always thought they just painted it silver so many times you couldn't see the rust, but I don't know the engineering aspect of that, you know, that's not my thing. But,
Is there any stories or witness accounts that stand out in your mind?
that did what?
Any of the witnesses' accounts that stand out to you?
No, not really. It's just I remember everyone seemed to. There must have been 1 million people getting ready to just get on that bridge or just get off of it. Okay, so many of the statements. Of course, what you do at that time, you take the statement, you write down what they tell you. You don't opinionate it. You don't. Pump them. You just say, well, basically like you're doing now, and then you once it's all said. Of course, in those days, we weren't recording it; we were writing it down. So I don't know if the patrol surely has those. I don't know how long they keep that stuff. But I would have thought those statements would have been around for a long time somewhere. But of course, that's a long time ago. So. The biggest thing that I always thought over the years about was that big fish. How many people just got on, just getting off, and I didn't believe them. You know, they put it together up there on the armory.
Do you remember any of the talk about the Mothman before or afterwards?
Nothing. And that's one of the things that
I wasn't sure when all that got connected.
When the bridge went down, and as far as I can remember after the bridge went down, no one ever mentioned or heard of the Mothman. The first time I heard anything about the Mothman has been, I don't know how many years ago, but it was in connection with, the Mothman was underneath that bridge down in Brazil. It went down too, and this Mothman is the reason, either that or cornstalk. But I'm not going to say there's no Mothman, and I'm not going to say there's no curse by Big Indian Chief, but
I just wasn't sure if there was talk going around. At the
nothing,
time.
man. No, there was no Mothman festival or museum or statue, and it was probably, I imagine the first time I even thought of the Mothman was when I went a while back, like I'd mentioned before, and happened to see that caught my attention. I went over and read that thing, got the names off of it, realized seemed to be one that's not there. It should be, but how do you even know who it is? And the Mothman. So if Point Pleasant wants to make a lot of money off their festival for the Mothman, that's fine with me. Okay.
Was this the most dramatic event as an officer in your years as a patrolman? Was this the most memorable event? Or where would you rank this?
I can't, I can't really say that, and the reason I can't say that is because I would not have a memory of any kind about certain things until an odor comes out. Certain odors will bring certain memories back to me that were more devastating than that bridge. Now, more devastating to me, not to the area or the families of the people that went down, of course. But as any one incident, the number of fatalities, that would probably be the biggest one I had any connection with at all. But how do you compare that to a van with 8 people in it, roll over, kill all 8 of them, and spread them all over a half acre? How do you compare those things? I don't know. A plane crash where all 4 people were exploded. You can go on and on and on. A watermelon that reminds me of a little kid impaled on a fence post. His mother crying next to him. I don't know how you answer a question like that. Biggest thing? You would think so.
How long were you at the scene? I mean, the scene, until it became safe once again, how long were you at the actual?
At the actual scene?
Yeah.
Well, if you count the roller dam as part of the scene, which I would, but it's not the location where the thing happened, I don't know, all in all, several hours at a time, at the scene out there at the intersection, that's not at the scene. Right at the actual location of the bridge,
Or how long were you involved?
3 or
in
4 hours.
Let's say with the, until let's say it became all clear. Were you down here, let's say for a week, 2 weeks, were you continually sent down here? To
Oh, over and over, odds and ends, back and forth. It was several weeks. When you get to what you say an all clear, it was never an all clear until the new bridge got built, pretty much. But I don't really know how to answer that. I don't think it would be too much of an exaggeration to say I was on the scene itself, the actual location, all in all, 6, 8, 9 hours. But that's not counting the hours spent knocking on doors and talking to people and directing traffic and tending the line at the dam. So that's hard to answer.
Is there a lot of work you had to do to redirect traffic in the interim before the new bridge was built?
We ended up having to tell a story 1,000 times. Why can't I?
Yeah.
And of course, most people at times like that, they don't want to cross the bridge. They heard on the radio that this is a mess down there, please do not go, so we have to go see. Rubberneckers. And you always get a lot of that anyway, and it aggravates you, but you expect it. And I think most of us probably end up after quite a few hours, ended up telling the same story over and over and over at the same time, just shaking your head. Gee, how many times didn't I already tell you this yesterday? You get the same people coming back again.
I just wasn't sure if the patrol had any hand in like directing people how to get across the river, whether it's by ferry, by train car.
No, really, because when you get this close to it, you're dealing with local people, and the out of the area tourists, the out of the area people, they were already called off by Chillicothe.
Does then Route 35 go across the bridge? Or no?
Yeah, because 35 went across the bridge, and they started trying to redirect at Chillicothe, because that's when 23 and 35 and 50. A lot of these highways come together, and the biggest worry we had was the trucking outfits. There was, we ran a traffic count in Jackson in I sat there for 24 hours counting trucks. How many semi outfits? We're talking tractor, trailer, semi outfits, commercial semi outfits went through Jackson on a 24-hour basis, every 24 hours. And then those days, it's just like right up here at this intersection where you had to come into town and then go up through Canoga. In Jackson, you had to come in and make 2 turns like that. And every 2.5 minutes, 24 hours a day, there was either a McLean, a Roadway, a Hennis, with about 5 of them. It was a green sticker truck, and every 2.5 minutes. Now, you can imagine if the bridge had not collapsed, and if you just put a gate there. So you can't cross here anymore. And nobody said anything. How long would it take for semi trucks to be backed up from there to Jackson? Hour and a half. That's a lot of traffic. And that's just the trucks. That's just the trucks. And that was our biggest concern. See, we couldn't send them down from Chillicothe. They first thought about running down through Jackson to 93 or 75 then. But they couldn't cross at Ironton. That bridge wouldn't hold them. They couldn't make the turn to get on the bridge. They wanted to send them up to St. Mary's, the same kind of bridge. They shut it down. They're afraid it's going to collapse too. It's built the same way. So they end up sending them down through Portsmouth, 23. Well, you can imagine the cost factor to these trucking outfits on the routing. I mean, we're talking a mess. We're talking a real mess.
And then you don't have GPS or anything else?
Don't have any of that now, no. And generally, these truckers, one of the things these truckers are always talking about, every time they finally got back to delivering a load, the roads had changed. You know, those guys never knew where they were most of the time anyway, because everything was so changed. That was the beginning of everything getting out of whack. Interstate highways, 4-lane highways, different routes of travel for trucks, bridge overheads. That was the beginning of the big traffic flow.
Was CB radio available at the time?
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if
Yeah,
communication would have traveled that way.
yeah, the CB radios were available then. As a matter of fact, some patrol cars had CB radio in them because these CB clubs put them in the patrol car. Now, you can get a hold of us and we'll help you out type thing. Ended up being a nuisance, but that's all right. But even the radios on the patrol cars in those days, it's not like it is today. In Meigs County, very few places in Meigs County on a patrol radio could you talk to the post. And the patrolman, the trooper in those days, you were always by yourself. You never rode double. And your backup, any backup you would have in anything was maybe 3 days away. I mean, there wasn't any backup. And things got handled a lot different then too because of that. Yeah.
Did you have any friends that saw the bridge go down?
Did I have what?
Any friends that saw the bridge?
That saw the bridge go in? No, not that I know of anyway. I knew a lot of people in Gal Police. I never had any conversation with any of them throughout the years that they ever mentioned the bridge going down. It got quiet pretty fast, but it's like everything else. You know what happened at Sandy Hook? A month from now, nobody will be talking about that. It's just the way it is. It's human nature. Nobody's got a memory that's longer than 6 months.
I think we were talking about a colleague who was ordering coffee and saw the bridge fall.
Yeah.
Could you tell that story?
Oh, well, that was Jim Sheets, Ezra Sheets. He was a patrolman, friend of mine now in Meigs County. Used to be the commissioner of Meigs County. Was for a couple of terms. He was stationed at the Gal Police Post, but he was the Meigs County resident patrolman. And he had just left a post meeting at the post out on 35, State Highway Garage Building at that time, across the road from where it is now. And he was on his way back to Meigs County to go on duty after a post meeting, and he stopped at a truck stop. I believe it was Sinclair, was right there in that area at that time, and got a cup of coffee to go on up the river with. This is what I understand how it happened anyway. And he got back in his patrol car, set the coffee cup on the dash, but the steering wheel to get in, and you probably the first thing you think is to hook himself up, but we didn't hook ourselves up those days, didn't have seatbelts. But he got in and started the patrol car and got ready to go. He reached up to get his cup of coffee to take a drink of it, and as he did that, behind the coffee and through the windshield, you could see most of the bridge. And he says that when I did that, I saw the bridge just rolled over, went outside. Couldn't believe what he was seeing. Got on the radio, called the Gal Police Patrol Post. They wouldn't believe it. I was trying to think of the dispatcher's name at that time. He lived in Middleport. Don't know. But he had to tell the post there a couple of times. The post wouldn't believe him, and Jackson headquarters, radio man on duty up there heard him. Just one of those rare times when the sunspots were right or something and your radio worked. And what was his name? He's from Oak Hill. But anyway, he heard him and asked Sheets, what, you know, and Jim had to tell him a couple times before they'd believe it. And of course, at that point, then the Jackson district headquarters and post, where I was assigned, but not there at the time, started sending people out. Of course, when he was telling them at the same time, I'm sure that the sheriff's department and everybody down here was getting calls too. But usually what happens at a time like that, everybody gets there and everybody's not needed, but they're there, and then it gets weeded out and thinned out and rules set, schedules set, and all of a sudden things start getting taken care of. But I talked to Jim here just not too long ago, and he said, yeah, I was the first one always seen, and I'd always heard that. I thought, I remembered it being maybe Cecil Carpenter, who was a patrolman at the time too, but Jim says it was him, and I've got no reason not to believe him. And I don't know what happened to Cecil Carpenter, if he's lived out to Benton, but I don't know. All of us are not around anymore. Right? Yeah. And I don't know what else. As I go back up the road after I leave here, I want to think about 15 more things I can tell you. Yeah. I think that's pretty well covered. As far as being right there and watching bodies come out and seeing them where they lay, and I know nothing about that. All I can do is imagine. And in a way, I'm glad I don't.